Okay, got it.
All right, let's get started without further delay. Apologies about the technical issues. Thought we had this all figured out. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here to celebrate Black History Month with the Division of Analytical Chemistry. I'm Michelle Kovarik, and I'm the current chair of the division's Education Committee. And I'll just briefly introduce our panelists and moderator before turning things over to them. Dr. Isiah Warner made his career in academia and is recently retired as the Philip W. West Professor of Chemistry at Louisiana State University and a Howard Hughes Medical Institute professor. His research at LSU spanned analytical chemistry and materials science and was conducted through mentorship of 68 PhD students, more than half of whom were women and more than 1/3 from underrepresented groups. Dr. Willie May spent his career at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, doing pioneering work on HPLC as a quantitative analytical tool, and rose through the ranks until being unanimously confirmed by the Senate as Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology and NIST Director in 2015. Since then, he served as Director of Major Research and Training Initiatives at the University of Maryland, College Park, and Vice President of Research and Economic Development at Morgan State University. Dr. Jim Mitchell worked in industry at the famous Bell Laboratories on optical waveguide materials, research that led to his induction into the National Academies of Engineering Material Science Division. He was the first African-American Vice President of Research at Bell Labs before going on to serve as Dean of the College of Engineering and Architecture at Howard University. Finally, our moderator, Dr. Renã Robinson, is a professor of chemistry at Vanderbilt University with research expertise in the development of proteomics technology for studies of Alzheimer's disease. She joins us as moderator in her role as current president of NOBCChE, the National Organization for the Professional Advancement of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. There's much more that I could say about all of them, but I want you to hear from them and not from me. So I'll just say thank you to our panelists and our moderator. And Dr. Robinson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the Division of Analytical Chemistry and ACS for hosting such a wonderful webinar on the last day of Black History Month. I'm especially excited to hear from our panelists, and we have some questions prepared, and we're just going to get into the conversation. But before I do, I'd like to give each of our esteemed guests an opportunity to just give some opening remarks. And so I'd like to start with you, Dr. Mitchell, however you would like to greet everyone and share some reflections before we get into questions, please do.
Sure, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Kovarik, and all of my colleagues on the panel, as well as all of the chemists and chemical engineers who are here. It's always a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to talk to a group of young chemists and chemical engineers who are still on the front end of their careers, because during my long travels, I may have had some events or learned something that I might be able to discuss that could be of benefit to you. It turns out that chemical engineering, chemistry, specifically analytical and materials chemistry, and also chemical engineering itself, has all been a love of my life for 63 years and counting. And during all of those 63 years, I have had nothing but the greatest enjoyment that you could imagine. And since I have enjoyed all of that, I have never worked a day in my life. Let me acknowledge, however, the institutions that have allowed me to enjoy those 63 years. The National Science Foundation supported me at 3 points in my career. As a junior in high school, I had a summer research program sponsored by them. As an undergraduate, I had 4 academic years and 4 summers in research paid for by the NSF. And now at Howard University, they have sponsored the thesis projects for graduate students and also provided me to give back to a large number of undergraduates. And so for that support, I'm very grateful. And of course, let me thank Bell Laboratories for the phenomenal fun that I had there during my career, and also now Howard University. I look forward to the discussion with you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. And to anyone who is not a panelist today, if you would please take a moment to mute your microphones, we would appreciate it. Dr. Warner, would you like to share some opening reflections?
Sure. I'd like to talk directly to the young people out there who are thinking that we have achieved something that they could never achieve. And I'd like to start by saying I am the least likely person to be where I am today. And the reason is I'm the first in my immediate family to get a PhD. I'm the first in my immediate family to get a college degree. I'm the first in my immediate family to get a high school diploma. When I grew up, it was the aspirations of someone like myself was to work in the cotton fields. And in fact, that's where I worked. I worked in the cotton fields. I hated it with a passion. And one day I told my grandmother that this is not going to be for me. And she said to me, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. She said, well, what about a school teacher? So my grandmother with a third grade education put in my mind that maybe I wanted to teach students someday. And that stayed in my mind. But in order to get to where I am today, I had to have people along my path who could serve as role models for me, because obviously I had no role models. My father had a 9th grade education and later on went on to get his GED. My mother had an 8th grade education, and my grandmother who raised me had a 3rd grade education. One of my biggest role models was my uncle who had a 2nd grade education. So without those role models, without those mentors, I would not be where I am today. And that's why I've dedicated my life to helping hundreds, thousands of young people realize their own dreams in science. And there are people out there who have indicated that if I had not met you, I would not be where I am today. Well, I take them at their word. And I thank all of you who have been mentors for me. And many of you don't even realize how you've helped me along the way. I mean, Arlene, you guys have helped me in terms of chemistry and the ACS. You know, I didn't know anything about the ACS when I was coming up. All I knew was the ACS was a meeting that you attend. I did not know all about these things going on in the background. And I learned about all of these things, and I thank all of you that have helped me to the point that I am today.
Thank you, Dr. Warner. And let me just give any opportunity that I can. I'm going to take a moment to just say thank you for the mentorship you've provided for me specifically and taking the time out to pour into my career. Dr. May, would you like to share some opening remarks?
Yes, I'll take a few minutes and I'll try to be brief. I am Willie Eugene May, the eldest of 3 children born to Willie Edward and Ruby Daniels May. And I was born in South Alabama in a place that I'm sure you've all heard of, Dozier, Alabama. That was a suburb of Seawright, Alabama. My father served in a medical support unit during World War II. And when the war ended, he didn't want to go back to the farm and plow and pick cotton. So he pursued a career in the medical support industry. That took us to Pensacola, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee, before settling in Birmingham, Alabama in the spring of 1953. He actually opened the Veterans Hospital there and moonlighted as a tax consultant and bail bondsman. And it was that later avocation that brought him into contact with Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, Fred Shuttlesworth, because he was the co-owner of the only Black bail bond company in Birmingham. I attended segregated public schools, Finley Elementary and Parker High School. And before I headed off to Knoxville College in 1964. As strange as it might seem, I, along with several others of my era, including Freeman Hrabowski, Shirley Malcolm, Tommy Wright, Matthew George. I hope those names mean something to some of you. We were all in high school at different high schools at the same time there in Birmingham, and we received excellent educations in the underfunded and segregated school system there. The secret sauce that we had was the excellent and dedicated teachers that we had. While they were deprived of the broad array of career options that we take for granted today, they took great pride in being excellent teachers and mentors and preparing us for future opportunities that they hadn't had, but they thought might possibly be afforded to us. I worked harder and was challenged at least as much and perhaps more during those days than I was in the graduate school and graduate school, the truth be known. I feel duty bound to single out a few people. Mr. Frank Cook, who was my chemistry instructor in high school, and he exposed me and a few others to college level chemistry curricula while I was in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. So when it got time to go to college, I knew I was going to major in chemistry because I thought I had a leg up on everyone. Growing up, I liked athletics more than I did academics. So I was always a competitor and I was always looking for that extra leg up. In fact, my father thought that was my way out of poverty, because if you work for one of the steel mills, if you play baseball and were a star player for one of the baseball teams in the area, you didn't have to work too hard because they didn't want you to be tuckered out when it came time for the game. And the season was from March until after Thanksgiving. So my father thought that was the way out, but my mother said, no, my boy is going to go to college. So I went to Knoxville College after my principal, who was Colin Powell's father-in-law, lost my application to Howard. I ended up going to Knoxville. I thought I'd be there for a semester. You know, you get there, you get to meet people. Long story short, I stayed there for the 4 years. Knoxville was the perfect place for me. Had I gone to Howard, I have no doubt that I would have gone buck wild and flunked out of school. No doubt in my mind. But in Knoxville, that was not a whole lot to do besides study. So I had, and that was the first place where I had interactions with whites that was not confrontational. We had a mix of 50-50 instructors, and they just, like my instructors in high school, were dedicated to making me the best person I could be and giving me the confidence that I needed to be successful in my chosen career. After graduating from Knoxville, I spent 3 years at the Oak Ridge gaseous diffusion plant, primarily because it gave me a draft deferment. I got married. I had a daughter. I thought I needed to be with them, and working there at the gaseous diffusion plant gave me a draft deferment, and I did that instead of accepting fellowships that I was offered to Harvard, Illinois, and Tennessee. Left there after 3 years and went to then the National Bureau of Standards, where I was convinced that if I was going to be successful there, I needed my union card. So I off to graduate school, and I actually worked full time and went to graduate school and finished in 4 years. So I started there as at NBS as a 1 year temporary and spent 45 years there, worked at every research and management level of the organization. And as you heard earlier, I retired as the Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology and the NIST Director. I went off back to my alma mater for 1 year before deciding that I owed too many people, that I had no way of paying back. And the only way I could pay it forward was to go to an HBCU. And I landed at Morgan State University, and I could not be happier. In 45 years, I had a 10-minute commute each way. Now I have an hour and 15 minutes each way, but I'm loving it because I'm doing what I should be doing. at this point in my career. I know I went over time. Please pardon me.
No, we appreciate it. And I think it's important for especially all of the young students who are on the line to know that there's a lot of opportunity and mobility that they have in analytical chemistry. So you all span different areas of the enterprise, working in academia, the government labs, industry, and going throughout your careers. But when you think about giving some wisdom to our young students, what would be one thing that you wish every young scientist knew about how to prepare for a career like yours in analytical chemistry? Dr. Mitchell, you look like you want to get us started.
Well, the one thing that I would want scientists to know is that certainly if you're going to pursue a research career, it has to be high on your list of importance. If you were to construct that list, your scientific career would be somewhere near the apex of that list. However, I would want that scientist to know that after you have expended your life, nothing you would have accomplished in scientific research would be as valuable or as important as having contributed to the development of a loving family. Nothing, let me repeat that, nothing you could have done in this life will be more important and more valuable than having contributed to the development of a loving, caring family. And you can have both of those. It's certainly easier for a man than for a woman, because we have a tendency to determine that the time is enough no matter what it is, and women are less selfish than we are, but you can have both. That's what I would have every young scientist who are pursuing a research career to know.
And I would add, don't do it if you don't love it. I think Jim said earlier, I think Jim, Isiah, and I would agree that we've never had a job a day in our life. We've loved what we've doing. So in order to be a success, and I'm not just going to say analytical chemistry, and anything you pursue, it has to be something that's a part of you and you love doing it, and you're willing to make the sacrifices that you have to make to be good at it, because you're really not going to love it unless you feel that you're good at it. And you have to, and that's the sacrifice you have to make. Commit yourself to the profession. And I agree with Jim also, you can't forget about the family, because you can't be happy, at least I don't think, if you do it alone. You have to do it as a part of the family unit.
I'd like to add something to that. I have met so many people, when I tell them I'm a chemistry professor, first thing they will say is, oh my God, chemistry was my worst subject. I could never be a chemist. And if you dig a little bit deeper, what I tell them, I say, I'll bet anything that your problem was not you, it was your chemistry teacher. You didn't have a good chemistry teacher. And I told that to a young woman just recently. I met her at the fish market, at the meat market. And she was saying, oh God, chemistry was my worst subject. And I said, I bet it was not you, but your chemistry teacher. She said, how did you know that? She explained to me her chemistry teacher had never had a chemistry course in his entire life. He taught her chemistry by sitting in on a course of another professor. He would sit in on that course for 1 hour and then come and try to reproduce that lecture. Now, you and I know that is impossible, but that's the kind of thing that students, so many students I encounter who think they hate chemistry. It's not chemistry they hate. They just didn't get the background back in high school. And we need to solve that problem, that we need to get good teachers in the classroom, because we're losing a lot of people who think they don't know chemistry or don't want to know chemistry simply because they didn't have a good high school chemistry teacher. So don't give up. And I tell students that all the time, don't give up simply because that chemistry teacher didn't do what that chemistry teacher was supposed to do. There are other pathways that you can get through into chemistry.
Thank you, each for your responses. So thinking about teachers as an example of just a really great resource for being able to learn about analytical chemistry or other chemistries, and help to set you up for being successful in your careers. What's one key resource that helped you all to be successful in your analytical chemistry careers? And then the second part of that is there anything specific or unique that you use to help you approach how you conducted research in analytical chemistry?
I'd like to start off on that.
Thank you.
When I was younger, I used to think I'd meet people who come up with ideas every other minute. And I said, wow, that person is brilliant. I mean, they're so creative. And I thought that was some mysterious force that allowed them to come up with these creative ideas. But I'd like the young people again to know that it's not anything mysterious. You have a bank of knowledge. You read, you study the literature, and from that, you assess how you can make a contribution. And, you know, I have found that I've come up with a number of different creative ideas that I never thought I would ever come up with. I have over a dozen patents. And it's that kind of background that helps you to move forward. Don't think that you're not capable of it. If you love science and you have the background, you can do anything that any other person is doing in the field.
Would you like to add to that, Dr. May?
My situation was somewhat unique, and that when I went to then the National Bureau of Standards, I, along with a few others, started the trace organic analysis program at the National Bureau of Standards. And one of the responsibilities that we had about a year and a half in my career was doing a baseline of pollution assessment in Southern Alaska prior to the completion of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. And basically, we had a boss who had told NOAA that we had the capability to measure the ambient level of petroleum hydrocarbons in that environment, so they would have a baseline to track any increases in pollution as the pipeline was put in place, began to operate, and he was lying through his teeth. However, it was mission impossible, and we had the ability to try to do that. We had carte blanche, all resources. And like I said, when I went to NBS, I did not have my PhD. I entered grad school and stayed on that project. So I started working 18 hours a day almost then, and that just became a habit. But I had so much fun. We had resources, and I learned how creative I could be in that environment. And the other thing I'll say that was unique for me, every job I had, and I worked at, I started as a 1-year temporary and worked at every level. And when I was doing that job, I thought I could be happy doing that job for the rest of my career, because I was fortunate in that I was given these assignments and I was getting the latitude to go for it and make it happen. I realized that was maybe somewhat unique for me, but I never applied for another job. I always got pulled up as my bosses moved up. And so I would say find happiness in what you're doing if you can. Use all of your creativity in making that job yours. And don't be denied. And don't forget that in your career, you're going to have to call on others for support. We all do. Everybody has, and they're lying if they say that they haven't. And we have that responsibility to lend a helping hand and help others. When I was growing up in Birmingham, living through all of those atrocities, I used to think that if ever I'm in a position of authority, and I had no reason to think that I ever would be, I would go out of my way to be fair to everyone. And Isiah has gotten on me a lot about being fair to certain people he thought I should have, but that's just who I was. And I found it has made me a better person. And I have always gotten dividends by behaving that way. As I moved up, make sure that you prop others up and pull them along as well.
Absolutely. Dr. Mitchell, would you like to add anything about key resources that helped you to be successful as an analytical researcher?
Well, the key resources have actually been the individuals that provided me with the opportunities to be submerged in something that was absolutely intriguing and enjoyable. I had them everywhere in my career path, starting in high school and especially in undergraduate school. The experiences that my undergraduate professors provided me had an impact on my total life. And I would just limit my comments to, I have been blessed with being in the company of extraordinary people who made the environment so exciting for me that it was absolutely automatic that I was going to be a research scientist. And I'll stop my comments there.
Thank you for that. So I want to talk a little bit more about the people, because you each have alluded to just how important people are, whether they're personal role models, having great teachers, or people that you work with, or that have lifted you up into certain positions. But let's talk about mentorship, because I know our students hear from all angles that they need to have good mentors and a network of mentors. But can you share a little bit about what makes mentorship effective? What does good mentorship look like? And Dr. Warner, would you like to start us on this one?
Sure. You know, one of the things that students ask me all the time, how do you find a good mentor? And my response is, more often than not, a good mentor will find you. And all you have to do is pay attention to those persons who have a distinct interest in you and in your better well-being. And that person will inevitably make an excellent mentor. And what you have to do is also probably find mentors in different areas, because not one person can be a mentor in every area. But along the way of my career, I had people who would take a vested interest in me. And initially, I didn't realize that this was mentoring either. I just realized that these persons were interested in my better well-being. But I would call on those persons and call back on them and ask them for advice. You know, I see my research advisor, Gary Christian, is on the line. And Gary was very much that kind of person for me. Even to this day, I call back and ask Gary to give me advice on certain things. And he's had a vested interest in my career. He's nominated me for a number of different awards. And I am appreciative of someone who's been there for me. And that's what you have to do, is look for those people that have a vested interest in you.
Dr. May, can you share a little bit about what you think effective mentorship looks like, and especially coming from the different sectors of the chemical enterprise that you've worked?
I think a good mentor finds a way to be what his or her mentees need to be. Just like treating people fairly is not treating them equally. There's no one recipe for mentorship. I found in my career that I needed to be what various people needed me to be for them to move forward in their careers. And certainly for me, I had a number of people who mentored me, quite frankly, who didn't know they were mentoring me, because I tended to find ways to learn sometimes what to do and what not to do in certain situations. Now, I had various people who took a personal interest in me. And that's the typical definition of a mentor who guides you along. But I think I found sort of mentorship in an obtuse way from a number of other people who I observed, and they let me get close enough to them to observe their actions and see what worked and what didn't work in various situations. So some people agreed to be my mentor, and other people sort of involuntarily provide mentorship for me by allowing me to observe them and see how they handle various situations in their career paths.
So I would imagine that each of you are probably approached on a very frequent basis from individuals at various career stages that are seeking out mentorship. So can you share a little bit about the mechanics to, especially our students, of what you found to be effective for you to respond to either requests for mentorship? So is it a student who sends you an email and is looking for a mentor, or a student who comes by and knocks on your office door or reaches out to you on social media? Can you share a little bit about the mechanics of just how you're able to be responsive to students and maybe giving them some ideas about what's effective?
All right. Mentoring is really a matter of caring about others, doing what you believe you can to help those who have decided to travel the same path that you've traveled, to use your experiences in a way that you believe will benefit them, to either reduce the height of the barriers or to provide greater opportunity and to provide additional experiences. And in mentoring, a good mentor tells you what you need to know, not what you want to hear. All right. And in order for a person to accept the information that you give them, they must trust your judgment absolutely. All right. So the process of mentoring becomes effective when the mentee trusts your judgment unequivocally. Additionally, everybody should have and need a mentor. I had one person who was younger than I was, but our views were such that we could have been raised in the same household. And anytime I wanted feedback about something I was going to do, I would call this person, who actually was a supervisor in an organization where I was a director in. And I would pose what I've done, and I said, well, what do you think about this? Because I wanted feedback from someone, although I believe enough in my own judgment and my own views that I could proceed without any feedback. Having a person
I'll say amen to that, Jim.
Having a person whose judgment you also trusted is always beneficial. So everyone can be a mentor and actually should be a mentor. And as I think Willie pointed out, you need to provide what that person needs to have. And I'll stop my comments by saying, I have had many students who would not have gotten a PhD degree in chemistry had it not been for me, because either in the groups where they were already, situations had occurred that professor was not going to let the student continue. And so contacts were made with me, and it has been possible to say, you know, that experience you had in that group, it's not going to happen over here. You are smart enough to get a PhD degree. You're intelligent enough to get a PhD degree, and I'm willing to be the mentor for you, and you will succeed over here. So mentoring can be a situation where you're not kind. You let them know what has to happen. in order for them to be successful. And I'll stop my comments there.
I'd like to just add one comment to that. I mentioned the fact that I have mentored hundreds and perhaps thousands of students, but I also have a mechanism because personally I can't do all of this. I built up a cadre of mentees who specialize in certain areas. Laura contacted me just recently, the young lady I mentioned before, and I sent her one of my former students whom I thought would be the ideal person to solve that particular problem. And it turns out it worked out well so far. And so I will call on some of my mentees to become mentors because they have developed those kinds of skills. So I don't always mentor everyone myself, but I do call on other people that I recognize that have these abilities to mentor others.
I guess my view of mentorship is fairly simplistic, and it's actually the art of meeting people where they are and taking them where they need to be successful. So that relationship is going to be a unique relationship with every person. And during my career, I've mentored a number of young Black kids, but I've mentored some whites also. In fact, one of our Nobel Prize winners at NIST considers me to be one of his mentors, so he tells me. So, I mean, mentorship is not an exact science. It's actually meeting people where they are and providing them encouragement, knowledge, benefits of your life's experience to take them where they need to be for them to be successful.
Thank you each for your responses there. So you all have just had such tremendous success in your careers, and you certainly have mentored a number of individuals, but not only just by being who you are and just representing, just a lot of diversity for a number of individuals in analytical chemistry, but also that it's possible to be excellent coming from diverse backgrounds. You all have created different programs to help make sure that these spaces are diverse and that individuals of different backgrounds feel included. And it seems like as a student, maybe you can only do that when you get to the heights that you all have reached in your careers. But what would you share with our students about how they can, in their own communities, help to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and respect where they are?
May I comment?
Yes, sir. Dr. Mitchell, please.
A student's first responsibility is to be the best student you can possibly be. And if it turns out that trying to participate in increasing diversity and inclusion interferes with you being the best student you can possibly be, then you've saved the diversity and the inclusion for a later point in your life, right? Having that in mind, know what your primary job is wherever you are. And that doesn't go just for students. You can be a beginning scientist. Know what your responsibility is and make sure you are doing that, and the people who are evaluating you know that you can execute that. Then when you get ready to do something about diversity and inclusion, maybe if your corporation want to participate with you in that, they will do it voluntarily and will support just about anything that you suggest. But as a student, your job is to be the best student you can possibly be. And that's my comment for students.
Dr. Warner, Dr. May?
Well,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, sometimes being the best student you can be helps another student. For example, in the class that you're in, you doing well, that student will often try to emulate you if they look up to you. I totally agree with everything Jim has said. I don't have very much to add to that.
And I too think that as a student, you need to keep your eyes on the prize and not be distracted. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. And certainly I don't want to belittle that. But while you're a student and you are becoming the person you have to be, the bulk of your attention should be focused on being the best student you can and learning the tools of your craft.
Now, that's not to say if you can multitask and be the best student you can and still mentor, I totally agree that you should mentor. But quite often students are not able to do all of those things and be the best that they can be. So you need to assess in your own mind what you can and cannot do and follow that particular, and even talk to your mentors and ask them if they think that you're being the best that you can be.
Thank you. So I have one final question I'll ask, and then can open up for an audience question or two before we run out of time. So yeah, you mentioned being the best that students can be. And you all shared a little bit about just the circumstances with which you grew up and pursued your education. And many of our students face a number of challenges today, whether it is hardships around burnout, financial hardships, still experiencing discrimination, bias, and just so many different things that they may encounter on their course to being the best that they can be. So can you share what type of encouragement you received as an undergraduate or wish you had received as an undergraduate to be able to navigate these different types of challenges that may come up?
Well, sometimes you're blessed. I don't think anyone could have had a better experience as an undergraduate than I had at North Carolina A&T University in Greensboro. There was a female professor there who was a foods and nutrition professor, and her husband was the chairman of the chemistry department. And together they had NSF funding in 1961 through 65. And the female professor hired, obviously, the foods and nutrition students and the best chemistry students to do research in her organization, and we had stipends. I was fortunate enough to have an academic research stipend and one during 8 weeks in the summer for 4 years as an undergraduate. I had my own project, my own instruments, the ability to learn those things myself and fall in love with research. It was there that I decided I was going to be a research scientist because of the experiences that this lady provided me. And she had about 12 of us during the course of my time there who got doctorate degrees in chemistry because of her exposing us in a way that made us fall in love with it.
Now, I'd like to add something that we've all implied, and I'm going to just bring it out in the opening. I would not be where I am today had I not gone to an HBCU. During the time that we grew up, there was considerable hostility toward Blacks. If we were to go to a predominantly white institution, we would be, in many cases, told that we can't major in sciences. And I can give you a number of instances of outstanding young people that I have met who went through this kind of issue. Now, at Southern University, I attended, we had 16 professors, 14 of whom were Black, 16 PhD professors, 14 of whom were Black, and had gotten their PhDs from some of the top universities in this country. But yet they couldn't go to a majority institution, but they were able to teach at Southern University. And those people served as, and I can mention a number of names that many of you probably would recognize, but they serve as role models for us and mentors for us. And I think had I not gone through that environment, I would not be in chemistry today. I would probably not be a scientist.
I'll just echo what my two colleagues just said, that going to an HBCU, and for me, Knoxville College was my salvation. it, for me, prepared me for the career I would have. For most of my career, I worked in majority institutions. And there, and like I said, I had my first interactions with white professors that were not confrontational. However, the people who instilled in me the confidence, the quiet cockiness, if you will, that I needed to be self-assured and compete were three Black professors there. Dr. Robert Harvey, who taught me a number of math courses, who got the cockiness out of me entering that, because during my freshman year in math courses, both semesters, I had about A- going into the final. I made 88 and 92 on those final exams, but those were both out of 200 points. So I flunked them. And what happened was I stayed up the night before, I crammed, and I forgot the formulae. What I learned from Dr. Harvey that first year was understand the basic principles, so you don't need to remember the formulae. You can derive them if you need to. And from that, I took 10 other math courses from him, got A's in all of them. I had 3 chemistry professors. My freshman chemistry professor taught me that it would be rigorous. We had 3 lectures. We had lab 3 times a week, and we had 2 sessions with problem sessions. So he taught me that it was going to be hard, but he made it fun. He had little sayings like, Dr. May, do what you oughta, pour the acid on the water, and little stuff like that. Remember, just a little stuff like that. And then I had Dr. Lawrence Bay, who was there, and my son's godfather, Dr. Jesse James, who took and these were folks who were brilliant, and they didn't have to be, and today they probably would not be at an HBCU, but they were there because they didn't have other access. And like in high school, they took a special interest in me and convinced me that I could be things, go and do things that personally I didn't think I could do. And I owe all of my success to them and that environment there in East Tennessee, when there was nothing to do except for study and play cards.
Thank you. So to all the students that are here, if you, caught onto the different themes of what our panelists shared with us, gravitate to those excellent mentors and individuals that gravitate towards you and that can help elevate you and teach you the way and share different things with you and also encourage you along the way as well. So we have some moments left and we have an opportunity to hear from our audience if they would like to ask questions. So please put them in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and we can call on you to unmute. I have one question from one of our audience members to get started to the panel. The question asks, have you been told that analytical chemistry is not real chemistry? If so, how did you respond?
I was never told that.
I was going to say the same thing. I believe that analytical chemistry is the chemistry that brings all of chemistry together. We have to know organic, we have to know analytical, we have to know physical, we have to know all of the chemistries to do the kinds of things that we do. So I think analytical chemistry really takes all of the knowledge that you learn in chemistry and apply it to real problems.
Analytical chemistry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Isiah.
Yeah, that's what makes analytical so special. Go ahead, Willie.
Analytical chemistry is problem solving, and that's what the people who the most important people on planet Earth, they solve big problems. That's what you do as an analytical chemist. So I've heard that, and I just dismiss what anyone says. I remember once when the dissertation project I had was really physical organic chemist, and I was at a conference and someone was lauding the work that I had done, and he offered me a professorship at a university in Canada. And I said, now, when I finish this degree, I'm going to go back and be the best analytical chemist I said, I can be. And his comment was, Willie, that would be quite a waste. And I said, I don't think so. That's what I want to be. And I'm convinced that I am going to be the best analytical chemist that I can. And I have never, ever regretted that decision.
Yes, I concur. Analytical chemistry is the best chemistry. Analytical chemistry is everything that is interesting. Thank you, Robin, for putting that in the chat. Lucinda, you have your hand raised. Would you like to come off mute and ask your question to our panelists, please?
I definitely would, Dr. Robinson. Thank you for recognizing me. I'd like to ask our esteemed gentleman, of the resources that you see now in analytical chemistry, if you had anything that is around now that you did not have coming up, which one would you say would definitely have made you a better chemist, analytical chemist, or not so much?
Personally, I wouldn't change anything for me personally.
I feel very much the same way. I think I'm the person that I am because of the various exposures I had. And I wouldn't know which of those exposures to take out of my life to make me a better person. I think all of those things contributed to my success.
Now, is your question, what things are available today that were not available to me that I wished I had earlier? Is that your question?
That's exactly my question, Professor.
Okay, well, it turns out I went to AT&T Bell Laboratories, and everything in analytical chemistry and all of the areas that we knew of on the planet we had. So I was just fortunate. I don't believe there's anything else that could have made me a better analytical chemist than I became.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Lucinda, for your question. So there's a question that's on the floor, but I think it would take us too long to dive deep into it. And the question asks, what is the best role for ACS in supporting diversity in chemistry? And we have like a few minutes left. So I'm going to trump and say that we should start with the articles that Dr. Kovarik has shared with us all in terms of thinking about ways that we can do better in this space. And then also ACS is partnering with organizations like NOBCChE in order to make sure that we really are beefing up our impact across the board in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and respect in this space. And then I'll end with the final question that we have from a student, Aisha. It says, what advice do you have for someone who is excelling in research, but has some struggle in the classwork? I think is the essence of that question. So advice for someone who is excelling with the research, but has some struggles in their undergraduate studies.
Well, one of the things that might prove to be useful is if you know someone who is doing extraordinarily well in the classroom, ask them how they study and what do they study. It turns out I had difficulty with one course, and finally I asked another graduate student how did he study for that course, and he told me, and I made an A on the cotton picking final and hadn't done well on the other exams. And it was just a trick of information that the professor would always put on the exam. And if you weren't aware of it, that oddball thing, you wouldn't be able to know the answer. So I would suggest that student get together with someone who is doing well and ask them how they study for the class.
I personally think that research really helps you in coursework. There's a professor at UCLA, used to be at the University of Michigan, named Sylvia Hurtado. I know that many of you probably heard of her. And she did a critical study of undergraduates involved in research. And she found that just getting involved in research, students typically increase their grades by 1 letter grade. And of those who got better grades, minority students benefited the most from getting involved in research. So there's a critical tie-in to doing research, because you have to understand the chemistry in order to get the problem solved. And some kind of way that person is not going back and recognizing that tie-in. Because once you recognize that tie-in, you will do better in coursework if you're doing well in research. That's my opinion.
May I make a recommendation to everyone who's listening? If you could, please provide Dr. Robinson with input about what would have made this a better discussion for you. All right, we would love to get input about how to make this better.
Thank you. And I'll close with one final question, so I can be respectful of everyone's time. Is it ANYL Robinson? Would you like to ask your question, please?
Hi, Dr. Renã Robinson. My name is Renã Robinson. I am a graduating senior from Langston University, where I am studying biology with a minor in chemistry. My advice is obtaining to my next steps. So I currently have applied to a grad program at North Carolina A&T to study STEM education for their PhD program. And I was wondering, what advice would you give a student like myself diving into a higher realm of higher education? Yes.
You're going to get a PhD in education?
In STEM education, yes.
My advice, is this your passion?
Yes.
Then there is no other advice you
Then
need.
go for it.
Go for it.
Then go for it.
It's a long time coming. I've been just trying to wander through the biology field, and I think I finally figured out my niche. I'm always been passionate about education, but I was figured out. I understand STEM better when I pair it with education.
You know, one of this country faces a crisis right now, in that we are losing our competitive edge because we are not generating enough well-trained scientists. Sort of having people in STEM education to teach some of the principles of science to people who are not necessarily going into a research career, teaching them to be good teachers so that we can build this infrastructure, so that we can address the competitive challenges that we are finding in this nation now, because we're falling behind the rest of the world, because our knowledge of STEM in this country, we're falling behind. Certainly the Asians and many of the European countries. So if that is your passion, I applaud you. Go for it.
Thank you. It really is. I just love being in the classroom, whether it's being a student or a teacher. And my goal actually is to develop my own STEM program where I can construct it so I can basically elaborate on the concept of STEM with the good modules, mentors, experimentation, where students can really adapt to it at an early age without it being too intimidating. So I think within this program, I can pursue it.
and when you become this STEM professional, we need you to help generate more male.
That is the goal.
Teachers.
Absolutely.
More male STEM teachers, because we need them.
Yes. I didn't get my first Black male teacher until I came to college at my HBCU. So it's important that we have that impact there. There's so much you learn from that perspective as well.
Well, go for it, Renã Robinson.
Dr. Robinson, I'm trying to be like you.
Hey, talk to me offline. I have a colleague who does just what you're describing for girls. Ryan, I'm sorry that we won't be able to get to your question, but please still put it in the chat or send it, and we'll make sure that we can send it to our panelists to answer your question directly. Thank you so much, Dr. May, Dr. Warner, Dr. Mitchell, for taking time out of your busy schedule to really share a little bit about your stories and give us all a bit of encouragement about how we can keep going in analytical chemistry. I really hope our students appreciated what they heard and learned, and I really hope they go and check your Wikipedia pages out, Google you, and just learn more about your amazing careers and life thus far. Thank you so much, Michelle, for the opportunity opportunity to host and moderate here. And I don't know if you have some official closing remarks that you would like to give.
Just to thank you all again. Thank you to the attendees. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions in advance that Dr. Robinson used to craft the program. I'll be sending out a post-event email with a link to the recording if you'd like to share this with a colleague or a student or a peer. And although Zoom is amazing for letting us do this, it always seems a shame to silently log off. So I'd like to invite anyone who's interested to unmute themselves and give our panelists and moderator a round of applause.
Well, let me make a comment first real quick. You could not have found a better moderator than Renã. I mean, you have been outstanding, young lady. I mean, I worried about, okay, will the questions be, how will it guide things? You guided us along the way and you did a wonderful job. I think you're the one that deserves the hand. You did a fantastic
Thank you so
job.
much, Dr. Warner. Y'all made it very easy. We want to hear from you all.
She deserves the hand.
And Dr. Robinson, I also like to make one parting comment, and that is that analytical chemistry is a stepping stone. You are a problem solver, and what this world needs is more problem solvers.
Willie, maybe we got time now or something?
You don't hear me?
Oh, no, we hear you.
No, I hear you.
Okay. What we need in this world is more problem solvers. Analytical chemistry teaches you to solve problems. And so I would
What did you say? I missed it.
That many of you who are being trained to be analytical chemists, that may not be your final destination. And don't feel that that is a loss. It prepares you to go out in the world and solve difficult problems. And that's what we need to move our society forward.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank
Thank
you,
you, Dr. Robinson.
Michelle. We appreciate all your effort in putting this together.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thanks to the
Yeah,
division.
thank you, Dr. Kovarik.